So I'll review very quickly what I said last. I talked about the Vedic and pre-Vedic era. The first tangible evidence of yogic practices can be traced back to the Indus Valley civilization. This is the evidence of it, where they, as I spoke of, they found these little artifacts. The archaeologists found little artifacts, little round clay pieces from their explorations and their diggings. And some of these clay pieces not only had, these are hard now, these have been fired, not only had figures on them sitting in yogic postures or standing in yogic postures, they also had Sanskrit inscriptions on them. And that to me is tangible evidence that yoga was going on in the Indus Valley, in northern India, near the foot of the Himalayas, as they say in India. So this is the proof in the pudding, as I said last time. This was real. It was remarkable. And one of the reasons it was remarkable is because these early yoga practitioners not only invented yoga, so to speak, but they practiced it and they invented the works, the written texts that came out of it, which were the Vedas. Those were the original writings on the subject in Sanskrit, the first alphabet of the world, and some of the very first texts written in the world in any language whatsoever. And all of this was happening anywhere from 3,300 to about 8. This is all rough, and it's speculative. From about 3 to 8,000 BC is when this was happening, before the Christ. BCE, the Common Era, BCE, before the Common Era. And that Vedic period dawned about 15 to 500 BCE. Those earliest scriptures of Hinduism were called, there were 4 of them. They were the major Vedas, or the Vedas. The titles are Rig Veda, that's the one everyone says is number 1. You can judge for yourself. The next one was the Yajur Veda. The next one was the Sama Veda, and the last one was the Athara Veda. I'm not going to spell these. I'm not going to go into depth about what they're into, their contents or their philosophies. This is just a video to inform you of this portion of the history of the philosophy of yoga from that period of time. You'll see in those Vedas terms like yuj, which I mentioned last time, Y-U-J, which means to yoke or to join. And what they were talking about, those early Vedas, was they were alluding to the process of uniting individual consciousness with the universal consciousness. In other words, your Atman, which is your soul, and your self, which is the deepest layer of you. It is your soul. It's not visible. It's your soul. It's a spark on loan from the Creator to your body that exists within you between your first breath and the last breath you take. It's on loan. The Vedas introduced rudimentary practices of meditation, breath control, pranayama, and sacred rituals, laying the foundation for what would become classical yoga. And I am teaching, my videos are teaching you, the student or the advanced yoga practitioner, the history of the philosophy of yoga. Each one of them has that common thread. I am teaching you the philosophy of yoga. Well, once the Vedas were done, and here's where that mistake came in that I made. I said that Veda meant the end. Well, it doesn't mean the end if you add ante, A-N-T-A to it. Veda ante or Vedanta means the end of knowledge. It means the end of the Vedas. Is what it means. And once that period of writing and philosophy and the inception of the philosophy of those writings and that world and those people that were studying it and discussing it and coming up with ideas and putting them on paper, that was followed by what's called the Upanishads. And the Upanishads, Upanishads, this is where the emergence of true philosophical yoga came in. Adi Yogi introduced philosophical yoga to his followers, who were called the rishis, R-H-I-S. Well, I'm not going to get into spelling because I'm an old man and I might mess it up, but rishis, you can look that up. And he introduced the idea that became the philosophy, the very early philosophy, and that evolved out. So those subsequent compositions of the Upanishads, which again was about 800 to 200 BCE, coming down, that they deepened the exploration of yoga with an emphasizing the quest for self-realization and transcendence. You want to transcend this world by learning yoga and eventually going beyond this world into the world of the philosophy of yoga. The ancient seers or rishis, as I mentioned, delved into that nature of consciousness, which they considered the illusion of the material world. They termed it Maya, M-A-Y-A. I will do a complete video on Maya that will be coming up one of these days with the blessing of my Creator. And they also not only discovered, but they thought about it in terms of the material world as through the realization of Atman, the soul. One of the Upanishads, there's several of them, I believe there was 108 now. I think there's 30 important ones, and I believe it was around 200 to start that were written during this period I'm discussing, when the emergence of the Upanishads were coming into being, when they were coming into existence, they were being manifested. There's a very important one in there. Well, all of them, it all depends on who's reading them and what their goal in reading them is about. But I want to mention this Upanishad to you as sort of a starting point, if you like. And it's called the Katha Upanishad. I may have mentioned that in the last video. K-A-T-H-A, Upanishad. It talks about, it gives you this little story about the body being the chariot. It talks about the mind. It talks about the Atman being the passenger of the chariot, which equates to the body. It talks about the path you're on. It talks about the horses that are pulling the chariot. These are the old-fashioned chariots, which are like stagecoaches, I suppose. But they could be two-people chariots, like a driver and a passenger, which is mentioned in the great work, the Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna and Lord Krishna. But now I'm going beyond the scope of what we're discussing tonight. But you'll find out about the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. If you don't know about it, this will all be discussed later. These are future videos, so we'll go to those as time dictates. So the Katha Upanishad, for example, uses the metaphor of the chariot, as I said. which basically illustrates the relationship between the body, mind, spirit as the central concept of yoga philosophy. So the reason I mentioned it here, because it is a central concept of yoga philosophy, and my specialty as a yogi, which simply means a student, a practitioner of yoga, the mental side of yoga, the wisdom side of yoga, the textbook side of yoga. That is my specialty, is yogic philosophy. Okay? So during that time, that 8 to 200 BC, yoga emerged as a systematic spiritual discipline comprising ethical precepts, meditative techniques, and esoteric knowledge that transcended ritualistic worship. And I think that's about covering where I was in the last video and brought us pretty much up to here. And I think I left off on the last one by mentioning a gentleman named, he was a sage, his name was, it looks like Patanjali, but it's actually pronounced Patanjali. And he did the codification of yoga in a book called the Yoga Sutras. Very, very, I cannot stress how important this little book is. It's a tiny little book. It's about maybe 5 by 3, and it has a blue cover sometimes, and sometimes it has a yogi on the cover that, such as Swami Satchidananda, that wrote his commentary on it. That's an excellent, excellent source right there. I'm not advertising that book. I'm not selling that book. I'm merely mentioning it in passing, and that's my review of it, that it has this pertinent data you need to read about and assimilate into your mind as you're beginning the stages of learning to practice yoga from the philosophical side. I hope that I didn't make that too complex, even though it was. So the sage Patanjali and his codification of yoga, he was around the 2nd century BCE, and he marked a pivotal moment when he composed the Yoga Sutras. And I'm not going to go into all of that. I want you to look up his bio either in Yogapedia or look up his bio in, these are the two sources I always quote, and I get nothing from either one of them. I'm not here to gain outside funds. I'm here to share with the world, and especially those, most especially those that are interested in yoga, the philosophy of yoga, as my offering to you, as an oblation, as they say in yoga, to you, the viewer and practitioner, or even just wanting to learn about it, the student, or just someone passing by that bumps into me and interested in what I have to say. And an oblation means the things you give away in respect to the gods. In my place, it's in respect to my creator, Brahman, to him. And I do, in church, you have an obligation to on Sundays to put something in the plate. Well, I'm putting something on the internet is my gift to the world, not just to a particular church or temple or anything of that sort. Yoga is not a religion. Yoga is a science. So in a way, I'm sort of an amateur. In a way, I loved science in school, by the way. I excelled. I truly excelled. I excelled. But yoga is a science. And in that roundabout way, I'm teaching the science of yoga, or passing the data on to you as my obligation to the world before I leave this earthly plane. My doctor and I were discussing this today when I went to see it. He was my primary care. That's why I'm running a little late here. I'm a little tired, and my voice sounds tired. And I asked him at the end of the examination, I have several maladies, I've mentioned those before. But he said overall, for my age and for all the problems I have, if you skip beyond those, he said, I'm in excellent condition. And we discussed the fact of me living to be 98, which is what I'm shooting for. You got to shoot for something, boys and girls. Don't just say, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to be here. That's not fair to you or to your family or friends or to the world. If you're a creative type or even a non-creative type, you will go when your maker takes you. And you say, well, some people go ahead of time, they get killed. Well, maybe he wants you home at that point. I'm not telling Brahman what to do, I promise you. I'm not telling any creator under any name, whether it be Jehovah or any name in any religion across the planet or across the history of this planet. I don't tell anyone what to do, I merely suggest. So Patanjali came up with his codification, and he composed the Yoga Sutras, and there's a concise and powerful treatise that's codified about the practice of yoga, and they're the 8 limbs of yoga. And they're listed in that little book I was talking about called the Sutras of the Yoga Sutras, and written by Patanjali, or maybe it's Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I'm saying Patanjali. It's Patanjali. I'll list them very quickly for you. Yama is one of them. There's 8. The 8 limbs. Yama, which is ethical restraints. Niyama, personal observance. Asana, physical postures. Pranayama, breath control. Pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. Dharana, concentration. Dhyana, meditation. And all of them combined, if practiced and established as routine within your yoga practice, mental or physical. One of them's physical there, obviously. Well, several of them are physical, but if you blend all this together, you come to the state of absorption or enlightenment, which I'm sure you may have already heard this. There's several videos on the internet about it, and it's called samadhi. And once you reach samadhi, you're well on your path to moksha, which is the liberation of your soul. When your body sheds this old suit of clothing, it's released back into the cosmos, back to the Father, back to the Creator. Again, I'm getting way ahead. Those are all videos to come. Patanjali's work provided a systematic approach, as I said, and that approach transcended sectarian boundaries, making yoga accessible to aspirants regardless of their background. His influence, and I'm reading this from my notes, his influence endures to this day, and the Yoga Sutras are widely regarded as a foundational text. And we're up to 23 minutes and 15 seconds. So I think we will start up next time with Hatha and Tantra yoga, because now we've left that the emergence of philosophical yoga, which was 8 to 200. So we were at 200, and we moved forward to Patanjali, and which was somewhere around 200. Some people put him at 400 AD, Common Era, 400. It's all speculative. We don't know for sure, but do your own research. Choose the date you want him to exist in, and accept it in your heart and your soul, and then work within the boundaries of what he's teaching. It's very important. So I'm going to end it pretty much here in a few seconds. I've got about 50 seconds. Next time we'll pick up with what's called Hatha and Tantra, Middle Ages and beyond. This is the yoga that we're going to skip from BCE up to about the 11th century, circa the 11th century of the Common Era, after the Christ coming. And that's really pretty much what I wanted to cover today. I know I skipped around a bit here and there. And if I did so, please forgive me. I'm not here to try to intimidate you with facts and figures and long phrases and long explanations. I'm here simply to hopefully increase your appetite for the knowledge of yoga. And again, I'm James Exum. My yogic name is Sakshi, which means the witness. I gave my soul that name because each year I get a little closer to my soul. One of my videos in the past talked about some of my experiences with reaching towards my soul and how that came out. That's at a much higher level now. You're able to do things like that. But your soul is still there. That's the little voice within you that whispers to you that says, hey, you're doing this right. Oh, no, you shouldn't be doing that. That's what Sakshi is. It's the name I gave my soul. He's your voice. He's that quiet inner voice that teaches you right from wrong. So, folks, pay attention to him. And I'm trying to come up with a standard closing. And I think last time I said, be good to yourself, be good to others. And spread those two phrases. Be good to yourself and be good to others. And maybe someday in 10 years, we'll all wake up and say, gosh, we're in a better world.